With that, I'm glad to take a few questions. Jonathan.
Sean, does the president still have complete confidence in FBI Director Comey?
There's no reason to believe he doesn't at this time. John.
He said, wait, no, he said that there is no information to support the allegations that the president made against President Obama.
At this time.
So is the president prepared to withdraw that accusation, apologize to the president?
No, we started a hearing. It's still ongoing. And then, as Chairman Nunes mentioned, this is one in a series of hearings that will be happening. I think there's, as I noted last week, there's also a lot of interesting news coming out of that in terms of the activities that have gone on to reveal the information on American citizens that have been part of this, particularly General Flynn. There's a lot of things that aren't being covered in this hearing that I think are interesting. That since it's ongoing, I'll leave that for now. But I think there's a lot of areas that still need to be covered. There's a lot of information that still needs to be discussed.
The director also said he's investigating the links and the possibility of coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russians. Given that the president just this morning said that the Democrats made up the Russia story, why would the FBI director be investigating a story if it's simply...
I don't think that's what he said, but again, look at what...
No, he did. He said that he's investigating the nature of any links between individuals associated with the Trump campaign and the Russian government, and whether or not there was any coordination.
Correct. But again, investigating it and having proof of it are two different things. You look at the acting Obama CIA director said that there is smoke, but there is no fire. Senator Tom Cotton, not that I'm seen and not that I'm aware of. You look at Director Clapper, not to my knowledge. Senator Chris Coons, Democrat from Delaware, I have no evidence of collusion. I mean, there's a point at which you continue to search for something that everybody who's been briefed hasn't seen or found. I think it's fine to look into it, but at the end of the day, they're going to come to the same conclusion that everybody else has had. So you can continue to look for something, but continuing to look for something that doesn't exist doesn't matter. There is a discussion, I heard some names floated around before, that were hangers-on around the campaign. And I think at some point, people that, got thrown around at the beginning of this hearing, some of those names, the greatest amount of interaction that they've had is had cease and desist letters sent to them. So
like the Roger Stones and the Carter Pages.
Yeah, exactly. The Carter Pages, yes. But I mean, those people, the greatest amount of interaction that they had with the campaign was the campaign apparently sending them a series of cease and desist letters. So again, I think that when you read a lot of this activity about associates, there is a fine line between people who want to be part of something that they never had an official role in and people who actually played a role in either the campaign or the transition. Julie.
I just have two quick questions on the hearing today. Does the president, now that we know that there is an ongoing investigation by the FBI, does the president stand by his comments that he's not aware of any contacts that his campaign associates had with Russia during the election?
Yes.
Okay, and then the second one is, has anyone from the White House...
Well, can I just amend the first?
Sure.
Obviously, just to be clear, I know that I'm trying to think through this for a second because obviously General Flynn,
right.
But again,
during the campaign,
right,
before the election.
And I'm not aware of any at this time, but even General Flynn was a volunteer of the campaign. And then obviously there's been this discussion of Paul Manafort, who played a very limited role for a very limited amount of time. But beyond, hey, Jonathan, hold on. Can you stop interrupting other people's questions? Hey, Jonathan, somebody's asking a question. It's not your press briefing. Julie's asking a question. Please calm down. Julie.
Are you saying then that the president is aware of contacts that Manafort?
No, nothing that hasn't been previously discussed. I just don't want to make it look like we're not aware of the stuff that's
Understood. And then the second thing is, anyone from the White House up to the president been interviewed by the FBI as part of this investigation?
Not that I'm aware of. Mara.
You said that you made a point of saying that Comey refused to say whether he had briefed Obama about the investigation, and also the president on his official account tweeted the same thing today. Comey made a point today of saying, please do not draw any conclusions from my ability to confirm or deny anything, but you are drawing a conclusion from that. So
I think we're pointing it out. I mean, we're making a point that it is not known, and I think there's further. I mean, to everyone who was looking for a conclusion today, I think there's a lot more that needs to be discussed and looked at before we can jump to a conclusion about. Hold on, but I think the point is that in the same token, you've got individuals that want an answer. And at the same time, there's clearly a lot of information that still hasn't come out or been discussed.
So you're looking for forward to this investigation.
I think that there is a lot more to come, is the answer that I...
The reason that I'm asking this question is you said that they are going to come to the same conclusion of everybody else.
My point is that...
So you already know what the conclusion
No.
is.
What I'm getting at is that there is this media narrative that continues to talk about collusion that exists, and yet every person that's been briefed, Nunes, Tom Cotton, Chris Coons, Democrat of Delaware, Clapper, the Obama appointee, have all said that nothing that they've seen makes them believe that there was any collusion. And I think there's a difference between talking about an investigation into the 2016 election, which we all know, and any evidence of collusion. There is no evidence, according to the people that have been briefed, of any collusion or activity that leads them to believe that exists. I think that is an important point that gets overlooked over and over and over again.
It's fine to look into it, but they are going to come to the same conclusion of everybody else, that this collusion doesn't exist. So you already know.
No, I don't.
When
What
the
I'm
investigation is finished,
no,
that's it.
no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that every single person, because what the director said today is that there's an ongoing investigation. My point is to say that everybody who's been briefed on that investigation, there's an assumption that because of an investigation, it must mean that it's about something. My point to you is that there's an assumption on behalf of most people in the media about what that investigation must mean. And my point to you is that despite the narrative that gets played over and over again with respect to what the investigation might mean in terms of collusion, every person, Republican and Democrat, that's been briefed on it has come to the same conclusion that there is no collusion and that that's over. So while we can talk about an investigation big picture holistically, the idea that so many people are trying to jump to a conclusion seems very, very misguided. Zeke.
Thanks, Sean. Two quick ones. First, based off the Tillerson briefing with the president, do you expect the invitation to President Xi for that summit that been reported on for next month to be, was that extended on that trip? Do you expect that to be taking place early April 5th, 6th, 7th?
I'll try to have more of a readout afterwards. I know that they're going to talk extensively about what he accomplished in both, Japan, South Korea, and obviously in Beijing. But I'm going to let the Secretary of State debrief the president before I get ahead of deciding what was discussed in Beijing.
Back to the previous topic, I was hoping you can square the circle a little bit. You said in the case of the president's tweets that there's an ongoing investigation, that more things will come out that may justify that. But in the case of the collusion charge, you listed all the people who said there's been no investigation there. Why, in one case, is that sufficient to say that there is no, you can rule out collusion now, versus in the other case you can say, oh, there's going to be more information coming out that will prove these tweets
because again, I think there's a difference. I'm not ruling anything out. I'm merely explaining to you that every person, Republican, Democrat, Obama, that served in the Obama administration across a broad section.
Same thing about the tweets.
In terms of what?
That they're on.
But I think that there's on the investigation itself, we know from the people who have been briefed. On the other piece of it, we know that it's an ongoing thing, and that even according to the Department of Justice, in terms of the information that's been provided, and Chairman Nunes, that they are still at the beginning of this process. That is a very different thing than a group of people saying there is an ongoing investigation, and from what we've been briefed, there is no evidence to suggest any type of conclusion. That's a difference. Hunter.
Thanks, Sean. On a slightly different topic, in his first 8 weeks in office, President Trump has made at least 10 trips to the golf course. He regularly used to criticize President Obama for spending time on the course. How is his golf game any different?
Well, I think two things. One is you saw him utilize this as an opportunity with Prime Minister Abe to help foster deeper relationships in Southeast Asia, in Asia rather, and have a growing relationship that's going to help U.S. interests. How you use the game of golf is something that he's talked about. Secondly, we went to he had a mini cabinet meeting the other day or 2 weekends ago down at his club in Virginia. And I remember so many people jumping to the conclusion that he was going down and playing golf. Just because you go somewhere doesn't necessarily mean that you did it. So on a couple occasions, he's actually conducted meetings there. He's actually had phone calls. So just because he heads there doesn't mean that that's what's happening. So let's.
know he did meet with Prime Minister Abe on the course, but we're not getting a lot of details on other high-level meetings that are taking place. If he is having these productive meetings on the course, why isn't the president and his aides being a little more forthcoming about what he's doing?
It's the same reason that he can have dinner or lunch with somebody, and not because I think the president's entitled to a bit of privacy at some point, where we bring that, which is what we've always agreed to. We bring the press pool, the protective pool, to be there, but the president's also entitled to a bit of privacy as well. Trey.
Does the president believe the FBI will do a fair job of investigating any sort of links to Russia during the election? And then I have one more for you.
I think there's a variety of institutions looking at it, both the House and the Senate Intelligence Committee, the FBI. But yeah, I mean, I think that when you get to the bottom of it, we'll have a much better picture of what's happening, and I think it'll continue to vindicate him on that. Go ahead.
In the follow-up, the president tweeted this morning a question about a potential DNC connection to Russia during the election. Right. Is he under the impression that the Clinton campaign had inappropriate contact with Russia during the election?
Well, I think that and that's an interesting aspect of all of this that's not being covered. Number one, from everything that has been publicly available, on several occasions, the DNC was asked by the FBI to investigate or to allow their servers to be looked at, despite all of the claims of their concerns about leaking. And yet the question still doesn't come out. Why wouldn't the DNC on multiple occasions rebuff the FBI? Why were they not wanting, if they were so concerned about hacks and leaking, why did the DNC not ask the FBI to come look? Not only did they not ask them, they rebuffed them on multiple occasions. Why? What are they hiding? What were they concerned of? But I think there's a serious question. I mean, they're very clear about the concerns that they have, and as well as all of the leadership in the Democratic Party. And yet, when it came to hacks and leaks out of the DNC, and they're quick to jump to the conclusion about who did it, and yet they wouldn't allow the FBI to investigate it. There's a whole second set of concerns here in terms of what was Hillary Clinton's role. I mean, you look at the Obama history, of the Obama administration, and the Clintons' involvement with Russia in terms of donations that the Clintons received from Russian entities. The idea that they sold off tremendous amount of the uranium to the Russian government, and yet where was the concern for that? What are we doing to look into that? It was the Obama administration in 2009 that talked about a reset with Russia and a desire to reset relationships. It was Hillary Clinton who signed off on the deal that gave a Russian company 1/5 of the U.S. uranium supply. Where is the questioning about that? What did they get? There was discussion the other day about a Russian official noting that both campaigns they sought to do it. Where is the concern about their efforts on the Hillary Clinton thing? The Democrats and the Democratic Party and a lot of those individuals are quick to point fingers, and yet when it comes to discussing their own collusion or questions involving their involvement with Russian officials or buy-offs to the Russians, there's no discussion there. So you've got to wonder on both sides, where's the parity when it comes to these kind of investigations? Margaret.
John, what constitutes conclusive evidence for the president on this front when you say there's more to come forward? You've got the FBI director saying nothing back up the president's tweets about wiretapping former head of the DNI, House Intelligence Committees. I mean, we've had a series of officials. So when does this end for the president? Is it March 28th?
I think, it's not a question of a date. It's a question of where we get answers. You look at someone like Michael Flynn, and you ask the question, how does an American citizen who should be protected by law from having their identity unmasked, how does that happen? Because you got to think about it like this. The FBI and all of the relevant intelligence agencies have access to this document. They can figure out who it was, right?
Sorry.
Hold on. So
who it was?
Hold on. In other words,
the wiretapping of the president. That's the
listen,
claim.
I understand that. What I'm getting at is that there's a lot of information that we have come to learn about what happened in terms of surveillance throughout the 2016 election and the transition. And when you look at somebody like Michael Flynn and you realize that while they might have been looking at somebody else at that time, how does somebody's name that's protected by law from being disclosed get put out in the public? Why was it put out in the public? Because the people in the intelligence community would have had access to that information. They could have found out who it was. But yet, you've got to question, why was a name that should have been protected by law from being put out into the public domain put out there? What were the motives behind that? What else do we need to know? Who was behind that kind of unmasking?
So are you saying the president has evidence that we have
No,
yet
no,
to be
I am saying
seen?
that there's a lot more questions that need to get asked about what was being done in terms of surveillance. who was being surveilled, why were they being surveilled, what techniques, why are certain people being sort of, quote, unmasked and having their identity known. What was going on? But there's a lot more questions than answers that need to get asked.
Who does the president trust to provide those
And I
answers
think we've
if
talked
not
about
the heads of all those agencies?
And we've talked about this ad nauseum, that the House and the Senate Intelligence Committees are looking into this. Today is the first of several hearings that Chairman Nunes intends to call. Senator Burr has already talked about it. There's a ways to go, and I get that you guys want to know the end of the book right now, but we're on the first chapter of this process. Steve.
So Burr and Nunes, he does trust them.
Of course.
To provide those
We've
definitive
put out a
answers.
statement saying so much that we asked them to look into it. So I don't think it should come into any surprise that that's where we have noted multiple times that that's where the president believes the appropriate place in the process and the classify and for all of these documents to go through. Steve.
The president said he had a lot of meetings over the weekend on North Korea. Who were those meetings with, and what was his reaction to North Korea's test of this new rocket engine?
Well, I think we continue to be concerned with North Korea's activity. That's why not only have we continued to have conversations with officials in Japan and South Korea, but continue to urge China to step in and to play a larger role in deterring both the ballistic and other missile threats that North Korea plays. I will try to have a further readout on some of those conversations, but I think there is a growing concern about North Korea. I think that is part of what Secretary Tillerson is going to be discussing with him during their meeting.
And did Tillerson get a promise from China to weigh in more on North Korea?
I think he sent a very clear signal that our policy of strategic patience is over. The President and the Secretary of State have an expectation that China employ multiple points of pressure on North Korea. We know that we don't agree 100% of the time with China, but as the State Department noted yesterday, both President Xi and Secretary Tillerson agreed that there are opportunities for greater cooperation between China and the United States, and acknowledged that there are and will be in the future differences between the two countries. But I think that Secretary Tillerson's trip continued to or helped set us down that path, and I think that the follow-on meetings that the leaders intend to have will be helpful in that vein.
Given the talk last week about the budget, the priorities for the American tax dollars, the need to cut programs like, or make cuts to programs like Wheels on the Ark, is the president going to consider curbing some of his trips to Mar-a-Lago, which the GAO estimates could cost $3 million for a trip for the president to Palm Beach? Is he planning to cut those back at all, given his feelings about the priorities for the Americans' tax dollars?
I think that is a vast reach to suggest. I mean, the presidents always travel, and I think the president, wherever he goes, he carries the apparatus of the White House with us. That is just something that happens. The president will continue to go and travel around the country and have meetings to solve the nation's problems. And again, I think just because I know you took a little bit of a shot there, I think even the Washington Post, which is no friend to conservatives, even they sided with us that these false sort of narratives on Meals on Wheels. It's not a federal program. 3% of their total budget comes from a block grant that's passed through there. It's a state-run program. They had apparently a phenomenal weekend this week. I get that that's a cute program to point at, but it is false and misleading to us to try to make that narrative stick.
So I know, to your point, that all presidents travel. No president has traveled so often and so early to their own private residence.
But
So
President Bush went to Crawford. I mean, there are places.
often.
I get it. But at the same time, the president's very clearly that he's worked 7 days a week. This is where he goes to see his family. He brings people down there. This is part of being president. John.
Thank you, Sean. Turning back to the meeting with Chancellor Merkel on Friday, did the President and the Chancellor discuss the economic crisis in Greece at all? And given the appointment of two officials to the Treasury Department who've been critical of the International Monetary Fund, does the administration see a new or different role for the IMF in resolving the Greek economic crisis?
Let me refer you to the Treasury Department on IMF. I think the readout that we provided on the Secretary's, on the Chancellor's visit, speaks for itself. They spoke at length